The Singapore GP again proved to be a weak spot for Red Bull and Max Verstappen as they suddenly face issues with the car. But is it the track, or does it have more to do with the regulations and the flexi wing? And if that has something to do with FIA's latest wing regulation, does that mean Red Bull will struggle to win a race for the remainder of the season? The door for a competitive 2024 has opened, and the cards are in Red Bull right now. But how will they deal with it? Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez believe that Red Bull's winning streak will be interrupted on Sunday. This is because they qualified in 11th and 13th positions, and this accurately reflects how competitive the Red Bull car was in Singapore, considering the setup they chose. It's possible that they didn't find the best setup for the unique demands of this track. Even if they had, this track was always going to be a tough challenge for the characteristics of their car. Verstappen mentioned that even on the simulator, it felt like setting up the car for this track was difficult. In contrast, when they practiced on the Suzuka track in the simulator, the car felt great, much like it does in most races. To evaluate their performance, it's important to consider the track conditions. However, even with that in mind, their performance was a disaster. This track has extremely fast-changing grip levels, similar to the Hungaroring. We saw a significant difference in track grip between the first and second runs of Q1, with the track getting much faster in just a few minutes. The changes in track grip throughout the weekend influenced some crucial decisions that led the car in the wrong direction. Verstappen mentioned that the car felt decent during FP3, but they made some adjustments before qualifying that made it difficult to drive. In summary, the track's unique demands put the car in a challenging situation. It went from being the fastest car to just competitive. However, not finding the right setup prevented them from even achieving that level of competitiveness. Why does the Red Bull RB19 car struggle with its setup on this track? There are some hints. Normally, this car can have a lower rear ride height compared to others without experiencing bouncing issues. This is thanks to its advanced underfloor design and rear suspension with more travel. However, at certain tracks, there's a different problem to consider. The car's ride height could be so low that it wears away the plank that defines the legal minimum ride height. Other cars, which can't go as low as the Red Bull without bouncing, don't need to worry about this plank wearing because they can't reach such low heights. But Red Bull can, and this became a concern at tracks like Spa and Singapore, where the plank wearing down could lead to the car being illegally low. At Singapore, Red Bull had to raise the car's ride height to meet the legal requirements, unlike many other teams that optimized their aerodynamics for this ride height. In Spa, the issue was caused by the combination of high speed at Eau Rouge and the vertical load from compression. This made Verstappen and Perez back off before the compression, while others could go through it flat out. Red Bull didn't sacrifice the downforce that gives their car its excellent performance. Instead of raising the ride height across the entire track, they had their drivers manage the issue by backing off only at the part of the track where it was a problem. This is why the drivers in the fastest car, Verstappen and Perez, were the only ones not taking Eau Rouge flat out. In Singapore, the bumpy track made it impossible to use the same solution as in Spa. Valtteri Bottas from Alfa Romeo hinted at this when asked about their poor qualifying performance. He mentioned that their setup, ride heights and stiffness were such that they might have become illegal after the race. To avoid this, they had to compromise by raising the rear ride height. This was similar to what Red Bull had already done. There were additional issues for Red Bull to consider. One of the typical advantages of the RB19 is its rear suspension, which is softer and has more travel. This helps the underfloor aerodynamics generate consistent and substantial downforce across different speeds and angles of the car's roll. This makes the car's downforce delivery smoother and less sensitive to changes compared to other cars. After conducting simulation tests, Red Bull arrived at the track with a softer suspension setup than usual, even though it's considered soft for ground effect cars. However, when they hit the actual track, they discovered that the recently resurfaced parts of the circuit were much smoother and offered more grip than their simulations predicted. This posed a problem because the soft suspension was causing the car to scrape on the track due to the combination of high grip and roll. Meanwhile, other sections of the track remained very bumpy, so they couldn't lower the ride height to address the issue. Moreover, the increased movement caused by the soft suspension was likely disrupting the underfloor aerodynamics, making the car behave inconsistently and unpredictably. On Friday, during FP1, Verstappen was the third quickest, only 0.1 seconds behind the Ferraris, when the track had low grip. However, as the grip levels increased during FP2, the problem worsened. The more grip the track offered, the worse the car's balance became, and it continued to bottom out even with its relatively high rear ride height. In FP2, Verstappen was only the 8th fastest, trailing the Ferraris by 0.7 seconds. Both he and Perez, who was 7th fastest, was struggling with a severe lack of rear grip. On Saturday, the team tried using stiffer suspension to address the unpredictable aerodynamic balance and potential plank wear issue. This change did make the car's behavior more predictable, but it didn't improve the lack of rear grip, and if anything, it made it worse. Verstappen managed to secure the 4th fastest time, just over 0.3 seconds behind the Ferraris. However, Perez struggled with the balance, and he was nearly 0.8 seconds slower. Both cars were still in the top 10 during FP3, and if they had left things as they were, they might have achieved a similar result in qualifying. However, Red Bull's ambition led them to make further changes, which ended up making the car perform even worse. Verstappen described how the car was bottoming out severely during heavy braking, causing his front wheels to lose contact with the ground. This made it challenging to brake late and maintain confidence in the corners, especially on a street circuit. In addition, in the slow-speed corners where they had been struggling throughout the weekend, there was a lack of rear support, resulting in small slides or in his final lap, a significant one at turn 3. In such conditions, achieving a fast lap time was nearly impossible. That's why they ended up in 11th place on the timing sheets. During his final lap, Perez experienced a combination of a tailwind and a sudden surge in power delivery, causing him to spin out at turn 3. His first Q2 run only earned him the 13th position. Perez summarized his struggles by saying, "Nothing worked, and I couldn't even get the tire temperatures right." This was also the first race where new technical directives regarding flexible parts, TD18 and TD39, were applied. This raised questions about whether these directives had affected a previous clever solution by Red Bull. If the RB19 continues to struggle at Suzuka next week, then it might be worth considering this theory. However, it's highly unlikely that it will be the case. I'm not entirely convinced about the idea of the long travel rear suspension. If they were truly gaining an advantage by running lower than others, why would they need such extensive suspension travel? I recall that there was a lot of talk about Mercedes' rear suspension last year, where they initially designed the car to run lower than they found practical due to issues with porpoising. When they raised it, they faced limitations because it wasn't designed to operate that way, and it affected their downforce levels negatively. Additionally, this circuit appears to favor cars with strong traction for acceleration out of slow corners. Given that Red Bull uses relatively soft suspension, could this be a reason why they lack the grip and performance needed for strong acceleration out of corners? I'm confused by the people who say it's because of the latest technical directive, TD. The teams have been aware of the FIA's plans for a while, and the car's specifications haven't changed from the last few races. But if Red Bull truly couldn't get past the regulations, then maybe in Suzuka we can again have a competitive race and watch nearly equal racing again. This weekend, Sainz was amazing when he kept Norris in DRS, so Mercedes couldn't pass him. He knew that if he made a mistake at that speed, Norris would pass him, but if Mercedes passed Norris, he knew it was over for him. So more of that please for the rest of the season. Do you think Red Bull can come back strong again? Let us know in the comments below.